Okay, is anyone going to tell me exactly how I ended up here? One moment I'm narrating a Lethal Company tier list, and the next I'm thrown into this void. I don't even want to be here, really. I mean, I'd rather be— Hello everybody, and welcome to the video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the 7 chapters of Deltarune, a game that is perpetually stuck in developmental purgatory. Can you guys believe that it's nearly been 3 years since Deltarune Chapter 2 was released? I mean, I guess it's not that hard to believe. After all, we've already received some teasers for the next 2 chapters, an entire Spamton-based ARG that revealed further stuff about the next chapters, and a seasonally scheduled Undertale and Deltarune newsletter has been established to give the community consistent updates on the game's progress. Based on the information we got from both the Winter and Spring 2024 editions of the newsletter, we know that Toby and his team have officially established a deadline for the completion of Chapter 4, and that there's only a few things left to do before it's completely finished. We still don't have a release date, but it certainly seems like we're getting pretty close. So now that Chapter 3 is completely finished and Chapter 4 is well underway, I think it's time I give some of my predictions on what the next chapters of this game are going to look like. So, as we know, Deltarune in its finished form is going to have 7 chapters. Currently, we can play 2 of these chapters, the first featuring 2 Dark Worlds in Hometown School, Castle Town and Card Kingdom, and the second in the library's computer lab, called Cyber World. We also know that Chapter 3 is going to feature a Dark World inside of Chris's house, and I'm almost certain that it's going to be specifically inside of the television. Why the television and not the living room or the entire house? Well, at the end of Chapter 2, it clearly sets it up to be a TV world. Susie clicks through some TV channels as a bit of foreshadowing, Chris clearly turns on the TV before creating the Dark World, and the chapter ends with an eerie, sinister smile emerging on the TV screen. Further evidence comes from both Spamton Sweepstakes and the Winter 2024 newsletter. In Sweepstakes, there are a couple websites that not only feature Chris's television, but also name faceless characters like Mike and Tenna, which are both shortened versions of TV-related words. We also got introduced to these 2 weather-related characters, who will most definitely be starring in a weather anchor-related bit. This would explain their pointer finger wands, as real weather anchors tend to point to things a lot. To top it off, the new concept art in the Winter 2024 newsletter is by far the most obvious hint, as it says TV time bright and clear. As for the secret boss and any new party members that might appear in this chapter, well, we'll come back to that in a second. First, let's establish what we know about the locations of the next chapters. To do this, we first need to recognize what day of the week Chapter 4 is going to be on. We can do this by analyzing Alphys' dialogue in Chapter 2, as she mentions that school isn't going to be in session the next day. From this, we can assume that Chapter 1 takes place on a Thursday and Chapter 2 on a Friday. However, this doesn't mean that Chapter 3 is going to be taking place on a Saturday, but rather over Friday night, leaving Chapter 4 to start on Saturday morning. Further evidence that Chapter 4 will take place on a weekend comes from Chapter 4's teasers in the 2022 status update. In this update, we got several music teasers for Chapter 3, including a new variation of the Hometown theme called Hometown Day. A need for an alternate hometown track and the use of the word day implies that after Chapter 3, we aren't going to be exploring hometown during the evening, but rather in the morning and throughout the day. There's even a quote accompanying the track that supports this. After the dark night, referring to Chapter 3's Dark World, the sun shines brightly. The Chapter 4 teaser images from the update also support this theory as well, as every single one of them feature Chris and Susie doing random things around hometown, kind of like they have the entire day off and are free to do whatever they want. There's even confirmed to be weather changes during Chapter 4, implying that a large part of this chapter is going to be spent in hometown. Hey, now that I think about it, wouldn't it be cool if these 2 characters from Chapter 3 forecast that it will rain the next day? Alright, now, I don't think that all of this chapter is going to be spent in hometown. In fact, if it wasn't for CH4 being in the file names for all these images, I would have guessed that they all belong to Chapter 3's ending instead. But Chapter 4 is obviously going to have a Dark World. The question is, where? Unlike Chapter 3, it's not exactly clear where Chapter 4's Dark World is going to take place, as there are a multitude of options to choose from that could all work. The options that I'm willing to put up as candidates for this 4th chapter are the hospital, the church, the Flower King, and technically the bunker, although I assume this one is going to be saved for a later chapter, so we'll focus on these 3 for now. But before I debate why these locations could belong to Chapter 4's Dark World, and then which ones could be Chapter 5's, I need to give a little bit of an explanation regarding Undertale and Deltarune's soul colors. During our time in Undertale, we are regularly introduced to different soul powers. This usually happens during important boss fights in the game, where Frisk's soul will change in color, gaining the ability to have a gravitational pull, block Undyne's bullets with a spear, jump between lines to dodge spiders, and finally, to shoot bullets. These soul powers are a way to give some backstory to the 6 other humans that fell down into the underground before Frisk. This eventually culminates in the final boss fight against Omega Flowey, where we are finally met with the souls of the 6 fallen humans and have to battle the flower that attempts to wield them. In Omega Flowey's fight, we learn the order of the fallen humans. The first to fall after Kara and Azrael's death was Patience, who had a teal soul, wielded a toy knife and wore a faded ribbon, and is associated with blue attacks, which require the player to patiently stand still so as to not take damage. The next human had the orange soul Bravery and possessed the tough glove and manly bandana items. Similarly, this human is associated with orange attacks, which require brave movement to avoid damage. Then there's the blue soul Integrity, whose human had the ballet outfit and makes us move with gravity in both Papyrus's and Santa's fights. And then after that, there's Perseverance, the purple soul whose human had the notebook and cloudy glasses. This soul color confines our movement to these 3 lines and appears during Muffet's fight. And then strangely out of order, according to Undertale's series of events, the next human to fall after that was the green soul, called Kindness, who had the burnt pan and stained apron, and locks our character in place during Undyne's fight. Finally, the last human before Frisk is Justice, who had the yellow soul, a broken gun, and a cowboy hat. This soul color lets us shoot bullets, and appears only in Mettaton's encounters. But hold on, why am I talking about a game mechanic in Undertale in a video about Deltarune? Well, because these same soul powers are starting to appear in Deltarune as well. And not only are they beginning to appear, but I believe that they're going to appear in the exact same order as the fallen humans in Undertale, only backwards this time. Just think about it. How many soul colors are there in Undertale? 7. How many chapters is Deltarune going to have by its end? 7. Chapter 1 dealt strictly with the red soul and served as the tutorial chapter. Chapter 2 introduced the first soul color in the form of Yellow Justice, and not only did it give Chris the exact same powers in Undertale, but is surrounded by a lot of the same elements. Undertale's yellow soul was closely associated with Mettaton, who is a ghost possessing a computerized robot body. This parallels directly with Deltarune, as the Dark World is a cyber world inside of a computer lab. The secret boss that introduces the soul power even has Neo in his name, extremely similar to Mettaton's final form, Mettaton Neo. I mean, come on, even the cars outside are honking Mettaton's theme. So, what exactly am I getting at here? Well, simply put, by using the order of the souls revealed in Omega Flowey's boss fight, and using what we know about each soul, we can predict not only where the next chapters of Deltarune might take place, but what characters might be involved as well. If we continue down the line of fallen humans, Chapter 3's soul color should be the green soul, Kindness. Now, let's take a look at Chris's setup to Chapter 3, in which they are scheming to trap several Lightners inside of their Dark World. These Lightners are Toriel and Susie, since they are in the same room when Chris strikes the floor. However, Chris also plans to lure a third Lightner into this Dark World. First, Chris runs the loud tap to sneak out of his bathroom window. Then, they slash the tires of their mother's car and retreat back inside. The slashing of the tires and the fact that Toriel managed to catch a glimpse of someone lurking around outside causes her to phone the police, exactly like Chris wanted. Then, in the last few moments before Chris opens the dark fountain, they open the front door, switch the TV on, and check to make sure that Susie is still asleep, before... There's only one key thing to take away from this. Chris wanted Toriel to call the police. They open the front door to welcome the officer inside. And who is that officer? Well, it's none other than Undyne, the character that turns our soul green in Undertale. So far, the soul theory works perfectly. Now, it is important to point out, even though the yellow soul was used in Chapter 2 and was surrounded by a bunch of Mettaton-related things like the secret boss's name and the location of the Dark World, Mettaton himself had absolutely nothing to do with the chapter, despite his existence in Deltarune's world. This seems to imply that regardless of the soul color used, the corresponding character doesn't necessarily have to be involved. Now, this is not the case for Chapter 3, as Undyne is going to be involved with the Green Souls chapter, but let's just keep this in mind going forward. So now, let's take a look at Chapter 4. Unfortunately, we don't know that much about the next soul, Perseverance. The boss that the purple soul is associated with is Muffet, which is not a character we've yet seen in Deltarune's universe. The items that this soul is associated with doesn't give us many clues either, especially since the yellow soul's items went completely unreferenced in Chapter 2. So let's take a break at thinking about the souls for now, and let's instead take a look at the 3 locations I mentioned earlier that I thought could be viable for Chapter 4's Dark World. First, the hospital. It's very clear that Noelle's story is far from over. The question of Noelle's missing sister Des still stands, and the fact that there are many references to this missing deer in Spamton Sweepstakes leaves me with no doubt that we'll be exploring this mystery in one of the future chapters. To me, the hospital is the perfect location for the completion of Noelle's story, seeing as her dad is bedridden inside. Tack on the obvious detail of the location's double doors, and the hospital is definitely a likely contestant for a future Dark World. Next, we have the church. As we know, according to Deltarune's legend, the angel is a very important piece of the story, and it's hypothesized that the angel is actually going to end up being us, the player. Hometown's church is not a place of worship for Jesus, or God, or any sort of traditional higher power. Instead, the church is a place of worship for the angel, for us. So far, we've barely gotten any context for who the angel is or why they're important to the story, and so a church Dark World would definitely provide a lot more details in that area. And as expected, the church's double doors have been conveniently barricaded by random characters in both chapters, which gives off the impression that this location might end up being a Dark World. However, keep in mind that chapter 4 is going to take place on a Saturday, not on a Sunday, which is the day in which we humans typically practice communion. So the church chapter could easily end up being chapter 5's Dark World instead. Finally, the third option I have penned down for this chapter is Asgore's flower shop, or more specifically, the very suspicious locked doors at the back of the shop. In my opinion, this is the most blatant out of all three of these options, and I'd say that besides the bunker, this is the only Dark World that I feel is absolutely guaranteed to happen. Nothing specifically points towards this one being chapter 4's Dark World, but the certainty that it will happen at some point makes it an immediate option for any of the future chapters. So, to recap on what we know about chapter 4. First, we know that a large portion of the chapter is going to take place in Hometown on Saturday morning, progressing through different events like sitting down at QCs that causes weather changes and things like that. Next, we know that eventually we're going to stumble across a fourth Dark World somewhere in the town, and it could be any of these three options. Lastly, we know that this chapter is likely going to feature the Purple Soul, and whether it'll bring Muffet into the picture or not, we'll just have to see. Now, let's move on to chapter 5. While I think that this chapter could just end up being the church just based on it taking place on a Sunday, let's first take a look at what the next soul color is after Perseverance. And let me just say, this one is very fascinating to think about. The fifth to last soul that fell into the underground was the Blue Integrity Soul, the same soul color that's associated with Papyrus's fight, and of course, the ever-infamous Sans fight. The reason that this is so important to know is because Sans and Papyrus are very real characters within Deltarune's universe, and not only that, but it seems as though Sans might still be very aware of who we are, not just as Chris, but as the player. Sans, in both chapters now, has teased us with the idea of being able to meet his brother in this world. So could this be the chapter where it finally gets to happen? And could this Dark World even take place inside of Sans and Papyrus's house, or Sans's shop? Well, I really don't know, but assuming that the secret bosses inside of these Dark Worlds continue to use the same soul powers as Undertale, we'll at least be able to see a Sans and Papyrus inspired boss inside this Dark World, which is exciting in and of itself. So overall, what options do we have for the Dark Worlds in chapter 5? Well, the church is definitely there, simply based on the Sunday argument. Sans and Papyrus's house along with his shop are certainly options to consider as well, based on what we know about which soul color corresponds with this chapter. As for anything else, the Flower King chapter could be here instead of chapter 4, the hospital could be here as well. Hell, I'd even say that the bunker isn't a bad guess for chapter 5. So, yeah, overall, this seems pretty inconclusive, but I will say that I think it is going to be one of these. It's all a matter of which one. The final chapters, 6 and 7, are complete wildcards, and will be wholly unpredictable as they're just a little bit too far out from where we currently stand. If we continue with our knowledge on Undertale's souls, we might see the Orange Bravery soul in chapter 6, and the Teal Patience soul in chapter 7. The only thing that I can say about these two chapters is that there's probably going to be two main events that take place that might even lead into each other. First of all, we know that Asriel is going to return to Hometown at one point, which will certainly be a major turning point in the story. This is supported by Toriel's statement in chapter 1, telling us that Asriel will return next week, and based on the weekdays, chapter 6 and 7 should take place on Monday and Tuesday respectively. The second event that will definitely occur is the Roaring, a calamity caused by the opening of too many Dark Worlds, which might result in the destruction of the world and the end of the game. Personally, here are my predictions on the next chapters. I think that chapter 4 is most likely going to be the Flower King chapter, chapter 5 is Sunday's Church chapter, chapter 6 is the Bunker, and chapter 7 is some sort of Roaring finale. Come future newsletters, and come the release of chapters 3 and 4, this will almost certainly change. As for when we'll be seeing these chapters, the confirmation that Toby and his team have secured a deadline for the completion of Chapter 4 tells me that it can't be too much longer, but I'm still unsure if we'll be seeing them before the end of 2024. Chapter 3 is basically finished, and Chapter 4 does seem to have a bunch of work put into it. But I mean, the completion of the entirety of Chapter 4 must still be a little ways off. If I had to give a window of when I think they'll be finished, I'd say that maybe Undertale Anniversary 2024 to early 2025. And don't forget, we're going to be getting another newsletter during this month before we even reach that point. So this window could change depending on what Toby has to say in that letter. So there you have it. Thank you all so much for watching. Oh my god, what the hell was that? Guys, you gotta help me. I think I just got possessed or something. Please, I don't know. And by the way, if you guys have any theories of your own, predictions or hopes for the next chapters, or if you want to add or argue against anything I said in this video, please leave it in the comments below. I would love to hear your guys' theories on the game. But anyways, thanks for watching this video, everyone, and if you're getting a little bored waiting for Deltarune, play Undertale Yellow. If you like Undertale and Deltarune, you're not gonna regret it. Alright guys, that's it from me. See ya later.